All right, forget everything you think you know about Dracula. Forget the fangs, the cape, the bats, all of it. Because the true story of the man who inspired the legend, it is so much more terrifying than any vampire story. We're going to dive deep into the bloody, brutal history of a 15th century prince who literally weaponized fear itself. And let me tell you, Vlad III, the Prince of Wallachia, absolutely earned his. His name would become a synonym for pure terror, and it's echoed through the centuries, long, long after his incredibly violent reign came to a final, bloody end.
But here's the thing. Our story doesn't begin with a monster. It begins with a boy, a young prince whose entire childhood was just ripped away by the brutal political games of empires. This is where it all started. This is where the seeds of an unimaginable cruelty were planted.
So when he was just a kid, Vlad and his younger brother Radu were sent away as political hostages to the Ottoman Empire, the biggest rival to their father's kingdom. Now, they weren't just prisoners, no. They were pawns in this deadly, high-stakes game. They were forced to learn the art of power and cruelty right in the heart of their enemy's court, all under the watchful eye of Sultan Murad II. And while Vlad was basically a prisoner, his whole world just fell apart with shocking speed. His father was betrayed and then murdered by his own nobles. Then his older brother, Mircea, was tortured, blinded with red-hot stakes, and then buried alive. I mean, can you imagine? This wasn't just a family tragedy. It was a brutal education in what betrayal gets you, and it forged this lifelong burning obsession with vengeance. So when Vlad finally gets to return to his homeland of Wallachia, he's not a boy anymore, not even close. He's a man who's been forged in the fires of captivity, completely hardened by grief, and fueled by this one single, all-consuming desire to make every single person who destroyed his family pay. And his first move? Absolutely legendary. To take back his throne, he invited the very noblemen, they were called boyars, who had betrayed his family to this huge Easter feast. He tells them, hey, all is forgiven. But this wasn't an olive branch. No, this was a trap. So picture this. The nobles are eating, drinking, probably thinking they've totally gotten away with it, and then Vlad gives the signal. His soldiers storm the hall. The guests are stabbed right where they sit and then dragged outside to meet his signature form of execution. This one act tells you everything you need to know about his style. Send a clear, gruesome message that a new and terrifying power was now in charge. So once his power was secure, Vlad's revenge kinda evolved into a whole system of rule. See, his cruelty wasn't random. It was a calculated tool he used to run the country. He used absolute terror to crush anyone who disagreed with him, to enforce his laws, and to forge a new kind of order out of all the chaos. Just look at that number. Over 23,000. And this isn't an estimate from his enemies. In a letter he wrote himself, Vlad bragged about this body count from a single campaign. This wasn't just war. This was extermination on an industrial scale, and it was designed to shock and horrify anyone who thought about crossing him. And his methods were, well, creatively monstrous. Get this, when some Ottoman envoys refused to take off their turbans in front of him, he had their headwear nailed directly to their skulls. He supposedly gathered all the poor and sick people in his capital for a big feast, then locked them inside and burned the whole building to the ground to, in his words, end poverty. His entire reign was just a catalog of psychological horror. And this story really shows the paralyzing fear he inspired in his own people. He placed a golden cup by a public fountain and dared anyone to steal it. And throughout his entire reign, in a city of 60,000 people, that cup was never touched. That is what you call absolute control born from absolute terror. But Vlad's biggest test was still on the horizon. He was about to go head-to-head with the most powerful military force on the entire planet, the Ottoman Empire, led by none other than Sultan Mehmed II, the guy who had just conquered Constantinople. I mean, the odds were just impossible. Look at this. Vlad basically scraped together an army of peasants and boys. The Sultan, on the other hand, shows up with this massive professional invasion force, including his elite special forces, the Janissaries. A straight-up battle would have been suicide. So Vlad had to get creative. So he waged a campaign of pure terror. He knew he couldn't win a fair fight, so he made damn sure the fight wasn't fair.
He poisoned wells, burned his own country's crops to starve the invaders, and led these brutal night raids. And in this truly shocking move, like early biological warfare, he sent people who were dying from the plague into the Ottoman camps to deliberately infect their entire army.
But his single most daring move came on June 17, 1462. Because he was fluent in Turkish from his time as a hostage, Vlad disguised himself and walked right into the heart of the Ottoman camp. He found the Sultan's tent, went back to get his men, and launched this insane, chaotic night attack. They slaughtered 15,000 Ottoman soldiers. Now, he missed the Sultan's tent by mistake, but the psychological damage, it was immense. And this is the moment that cemented his legend forever. As the Sultan's massive army finally got close to Vlad's capital, they weren't met by soldiers. They were met by a forest. A forest of 20,000 impaled Turkish corpses, the remains of a previous army, just rotting in the sun. The sight was so horrifying, so completely demoralizing, that even Mehmed the Conqueror had seen enough. He turned his whole army around and went home. Vlad won, not with swords, but with terror. Now, you'd think that defeating an entire empire would make you a hero, right? But Vlad's end was drenched in a kind of bitter irony. His downfall didn't come from his greatest enemy. It came from the people he thought were his friends. After fighting his whole life to defend Christendom from the Ottomans, Vlad went to his Christian ally, the King of Hungary, asking for help. But instead of getting aid, the king had him arrested on fake treason charges and threw him in a dungeon for more than 10 years. The great defender of Europe was betrayed by Europe. He did eventually get out of prison and even managed to reclaim his throne one last time in 1476. But his final rule lasted less than 2 months. He was killed fighting yet another Ottoman invasion, and in a final, grisly act of revenge, his head was chopped off, preserved in honey, and sent to the Sultan in Constantinople as a trophy. And that leads us to the final mystery. To this day, nobody knows for sure where his body is. A tomb that was thought to be his was opened back in the 1930s, but the coffin was empty. Another potential grave was excavated, but the skeleton and the royal artifacts they found inside, they later vanished from a museum. The Impaler's final resting place is still a secret. So over the centuries, the horrifying reality of the man began to fade, and a myth took its place. And then, in the 1890s, an Irish author named Bram Stoker was looking for a cool, scary name for his vampire count. He stumbled upon Dracula. And just like that, the most brutal warlord in European history was reborn as the world's most famous monster. So that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? In his homeland, a lot of people see him as a brutal but necessary national hero who saved them from an empire. The rest of the world just sees a monster. So what do you think? Was he a patriot who did what he had to do to survive? Or was he a psychopath who just found the perfect outlet for his cruelty? Let me know what you think down in the comments.